Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a new fantasy releases wrap up. Before jumping into it, a big thank you to GlassesUSA.com for working with me on today's video. I've been using GlassesUSA.com for years. I was using them before I started working with them. I genuinely really love their service. They make your glasses a lot more affordable. They take the middleman out of the equation. You can buy your glasses online, you upload a photo of yourself, and you can try things on virtually. And they have a variety of different styles, a variety of different shapes and sizes. You can also get prescription sunglasses, non-prescription sunglasses, blue light blocking lenses. If you're not sure what your prescription is, you can actually scan your glasses and it will figure out your prescription for you, so you don't even have to go in. The pairs that I have been wearing the most often recently would be this pair. I can never not love this pair of glasses. I love the size, I love the shape, I love the color, and it does come in a lot of other colors as well, so at some point I might have to snag some of the other colors also. I also have been really loving this pair, just a classic black frame. There's a hint of cat eye on the edges, which I really like, but they're subtle while still being, I think, kind of a classic look. They're not too big in their size, but the black makes it an ultimate neutral. It basically goes with everything, and I think they look rather professional. They have a lot of different styles and colors beyond just the ones I showed, of course, so I'll have them linked down below if you'd like to check them out, and of course, if you're interested in either of these pairs, I'll have them linked as well. The list is going to be kind of interesting today. We have two books that I didn't necessarily care for, one that I really loved, and I have talked about quite a bit recently, as it did just recently come out, and I've mentioned it in a few videos, and then one that I feel rather conflicted on. I'm going to start with that one because I actually think that I will have to do an in-depth video to really go into why I feel the way I do about this book. The book would be A Far Wilder Magic. The reason I feel a little uncomfortable, I guess, with this story is because this is basically fan fiction of Full Metal Alchemist. Specifically, it is fan fiction of Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye. And I know a lot of you know, I absolutely love Full Metal Alchemist, and I want to acknowledge and state that and make it known, because I think it's very true that when you really love something, sometimes you have a tendency to be protective of it. And I have sat for so long thinking through, is that what's happening? Am I just feeling protective of one of my favorite series? And I think the answer is no. I have thought through so many of the plot points, the character types, the setting, the amount of similarities between things that happen in this and things that happen in Full Metal, or the kinds of characters that you have in Full Metal. And I feel a little uncomfortable because it's more like Full Metal Alchemist than certain retellings are of the things that they are retelling. And that, to me, I think kind of captures why it makes me a little uncomfortable. It's acknowledged by the author when she talks about it. She has kind of pitched it as Full Metal Alchemist meets the Scorpio races, which I haven't read that one. But the synopsis on Goodreads, the synopsis on the book, the acknowledgements, nowhere there does it state anything about Full Metal Alchemist or Arakawa, the writer and artist for Full Metal Alchemist. But I'm going to mention characters from one story, and then I'm going to mention characters from this story, and I'm not going to use their names. I'm just going to tell you about them, and then you will see. I'm going to describe a little bit of the settings as well. So we have one that is essentially a 1920s inspired world where you have a militaristic society, and in order to really establish yourself within this militaristic society, you have to become a state alchemist. One of our characters recognizes that that is how you attain power, and they want to attain this power for themselves so they can make the world a better place from the inside. They also have somebody that is standing by their side who watches over them, who has their back, and that individual is a sharpshooter. The other story has a 1920s inspired setting that follows a young man who has a lot of ambition and wants to make the world a better place, and recognizes that in order to do that, you essentially have to become a state alchemist. They currently do not have alchemical prowess and need to find somebody to teach them alchemy, so they seek out a master alchemist. However, that master alchemist is not currently available, which they don't discover until they get there. And then once they get there, though, that individual's daughter is currently present, and she is a sharpshooter who is maintaining her family home until their parent returns. That just kind of scratches the surface to the similarities. The first one I described is Full Metal Alchemist, and it's relating to Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye, and then the other one is this book, A Far Wilder Magic. So essentially, A Far Wilder Magic is taking a lot of the setting and the backstories of the characters and the character types, and it is expanding on them within what would be the backstory of Roy and Riza from Full Metal Alchemist. So there is some elaboration, there's some filling in the gaps that you don't see in Full Metal, that this author, that's really where they're exploring their story. But there's so many similarities. I don't think that everybody's going to feel that way, and I've seen some people that absolutely loved the fact that this is basically Roy and Riza fan fiction. They really like that about this. And I wouldn't mind that it was Roy and Riza fan fiction if it was clearly stated that it is fan fiction. And the fact that it's being sold and it's making money, I just feel like the publisher should have, the similarities, like I said, this is just scratches the surface. What the characters look like, exact phrases from Full Metal Alchemist, basically exact scenes from Full Metal Alchemist are taken and are in this story, and exact plot points play out very similarly. So it's not exactly the same. There are other elements to it within this story that are unique and separate from Full Metal. So the thing that makes this very much its own thing is that there is this mythical creature that is real, and it only comes about every so many years, but it does wreak havoc when it arrives. And so there's this hunt that takes place, and you have to have basically a sharpshooter and an alchemist team up to go on this hunt, and you have various different teams. And whoever is able to take down this creature wins, and they win a lot of money. And the character that is kind of like the Roy Mustang character, his family is really hurting, and so he really needs this money. And also, like I said, he's got a lot of ambitions, and he knows in order to try and prove himself to this master alchemist who is not yet there, he figures, okay, well, if I can do this, maybe I can gain this person's attention and they'll absolutely take me on as an apprentice. So this is his goal. And that part, yes, that part is unique and that part is different. I haven't read the Scorpio races, so it's possible that that's kind of where, when the author has described this as Scorpio races meets Full Metal, maybe that's kind of where that's coming from. I can't comment on any similarities in that regard, but I mean, throughout the story, I was enjoying the story and I like the writing style. And I think that there are some themes that are executed very well, but I just could not separate the similarities to Full Metal. I couldn't see this as its own thing, really. And it made me question whether some of what I was liking about the book, was that really because of this book, or is it because of Arakawa? Is it because of the things that we're pulling from that? I want to make an in-depth video going over a lot of the things that are paralleled. I don't know for sure if I will, but I think if I want to really articulate why I feel the way I do, that would be the opportunity to do it. And some of it I think does require to spoil a few things, and I don't want to spoil things for Full Metal if you haven't read Full Metal Alchemist. So I can't really go entirely as in-depth as I would like here. I'd have to do that separately. Anyway, I'm going to move on now to some of the other books. I'm going to have timestamps down below. The next one I'm going to mention is the one that I have talked about a fair amount recently, and that would be The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. So if you want to skip ahead to a couple of other books, you can do so. This is one that follows a young woman who is a witch within our own world, who she knows that she cannot let her magic really be discovered because it is not known that witches truly exist. And she ends up being employed to teach these 3 young orphan girls how to try and control their magic. And while she is doing this, she's kind of living on site. She's working with these young girls. She's teaching these young girls. And that aspect of the story is really sweet, but there's also a very sweet love story, and the side characters are all absolutely adorable. This book was really, really precious. On the topic of things being kind of similar to other things, this is definitely along the same lines as House in the Cerulean Sea. And I think a lot of the themes are somewhat similar and the setup is similar. For me, this was kind of like, this is within the same genre of cozy, sweet, contemporary fantasy. And it's kind of got its similarities, but I definitely felt like it was its own story. Either way, I thought it was really adorable. I liked the exploration too with our main characters. The woman of the story is somebody who she has felt somewhat isolated and alone a lot of her life. So you really dive into that. And then the love interest is somebody who has had a very unhealthy relationship with his family and the things that were placed on him, the expectations that were put on his shoulders, the way that his family members treated him, and the way that some family members didn't do anything in his defense. The way that that is explored, I thought was really well done. It's one of those stories where the sweetness and the cute factor, I think, are definitely more of what you're going to get out of this, but those additional aspects to the characters, while they're not at the forefront, they did add a lot more depth to the story, and it resulted in, for me, just being like the absolute perfect, cozy, heartwarming, but also powerful stories. It's great, and I think it's absolutely perfect for this time of year also. Another book that's very suited for this time of year, it didn't personally work for me, but I know a lot of you are going to love it, and that would be A Dowry of Blood. This was originally self-published. It has been picked up and is going to be reprinted as a traditionally published book, and this is what the traditionally published version will look like. This is a vampire story. We follow a woman who is basically one of Dracula's brides, and we are seeing a very unhealthy relationship that she is trying to escape from. The way that the story is told and written, I think that it created a feeling that is very true to how a person feels when they are caught up in something very toxic. So there is this kind of haziness to the story. We do go over a lot of time. It's penned as a letter, essentially. And it's describing why the character at the very, very beginning, she describes how this is why I murdered you, basically. And you're kind of starting to see everything unfold, and you're seeing why she chose to do what she did. It's almost like she's writing this letter to the person who was basically her abuser without actually talking to them, but it's almost like she's writing it for herself as well, and then you, the reader. The haziness of the story, when I was saying that it describes that feeling, for anybody that's been in an environment where they are afraid, where they fear for their safety, where they are fearful that in saying a certain thing you're going to upset someone, where you're walking on eggshells all the time, if you've lived in that kind of an environment before, it does start to weigh on you. You kind of shut down and you go into this survival mode. And I think that this book captures that feeling really well. I personally think the vampire elements of the story, I would have, I guess in a strange way, I kind of would have preferred if this was just a contemporary story, or maybe not to do with vampires, because it was kind of strange to see a person who is frustrated with their significant other for certain actions and behaviors, and then they also don't seem to care too much when that person is feeding off of children or innocent people, because our main character is somebody who, when they're first turned into a vampire, which is the very beginning of the story, they think I was given this power to try and be this divine justice, essentially. So when they feed on people, they're going after people who are horrible, people who have harmed children, people who have beaten the innocent. That's who she feeds on. And she grew up and you get hints about the time in which she lived as a human, and there was definitely a big religious aspect to her mindset, so that's why she kind of feels, oh, God gave me this so that I can exact justice and vengeance on these people on behalf of the innocent. And her significant other just feeds on whoever, and he kind of mocks that she does that, and he's like, one of these days you'll learn. And okay, so I feel like right there, I would a little bit, this is what I mean by the vampire elements kind of took it out for me, because I'm like, I mean, he's kind of already horrible, right? I don't need him to start mistreating me to recognize that he's awful when he feeds off of innocent people, if that's something that I care about, because she does care about that, the main character does. So I'm like, I feel like it's a little bit of a double standard. That is so not the point, though, of the book. And that's just like a me thing that I got caught up in. So many people who resonate with the main theme, which is being in this really unhealthy relationship, have really liked how it's portrayed and how it's executed, and really love how it's done. So I think that it's very powerful, and it has a lot to it that a lot of people are going to really like. Just some stupid part of my brain just couldn't like shut off the fact that I'm like, yeah, but he's also killing nice people, though. And so it's on me. It's 100% on me. I want to add, too, that there is this, what is basically an epilogue at the end. Obviously, that's where epilogues go, called An Encore of Roses. It doesn't say epilogue. It doesn't clarify that this was written for, I believe it was the author's newsletter subscribers, since this was originally self-published. But there is this additional thing at the end of this book that, in my opinion, was not something I would have included within this printing, because, again, it doesn't formally acknowledge that this was bonus material. Here is an epilogue. It doesn't do that. And the way the book ends, I think it ends really well. It kind of closes the door on this chapter of this person's life. So I thought that the ending suited the tone and the themes of the story. And then you get this additional little thing at the end that, because it's not properly acknowledged as something separate, as bonus material, I think people who haven't read the original are going to read it and they're going to get to the end, they're going to get to that part, and they're going to be like, this is kind of weird. Because it doesn't fit. It's from the perspective of another character, and it's kind of a, let's see where everybody's at now kind of a thing. It's kind of like a reunion chapter. And so I just didn't think it was particularly fitting. So if you do pick up this book, just know that that last chunk is bonus material. Last for today, we have Hotel Magnifique. This has been compared by a lot of people to the Night Circus. It also reminded me quite a bit of Caraval. So it has that, there's this traveling, mysterious thing that comes around every so often, and our main characters really want to participate or become a part of whatever that thing is. In this book's case, it is this magical hotel. And the thing that especially reminded me of Caraval is the sister relationship. In Caraval, you have an older sister whose younger sister really wants to be a part of Caraval, and the older sister is very protective of her. And so you have a similar thing in this as well. Our main character, Johnny, is somebody who is intrigued by Hotel Magnifique, who wants to be a part of this, who wants to provide something better for her younger sister, Zosa. And so the two of them go together to Hotel Magnifique. At first, it seems very dazzling. Beyond just the fact that it appears every so often, there's also the fact that it goes to a new destination every midnight, so you can kind of travel the world in this magical hotel. And at first, it does seem intriguing and dazzling and wonderful, and then you're starting to realize there's something more sinister going on. The reason that this book didn't end up being for me, even though I really liked so much about it, and it seemed like it had all the right ingredients, is just the way everything kind of came together is the part that didn't click with me. So in the case of a book like this, where it doesn't really necessarily feel like we have a specific set plot, it's going to end up relying a lot on the descriptions of everything and the whimsical factor or the eerie factor, depending on which direction you're going. And this book, I almost wish that it had leaned into magical aspects a little bit more, that had really been a little bit more bizarre. I think I would have liked that, or I would have liked it to be a lot more character focused and character driven, and to maybe have been a little bit eerier and darker. And it does eventually get dark, but the pacing was kind of strange. For a long time, once the sisters arrive at the hotel, you're seeing them kind of exploring things. The younger sister, Zosa, is a wonderful singer, and so she's been hired as a performer. And then Johnny is somebody who has been employed by the hotel, but not for anything quite so extravagant. And so she's kind of taking on her new tasks and seeing the majesty of the hotel. And there was a little part of me for a while that's like, what are we doing here a little bit? Like, I was kind of waiting for more to happen. And then things do happen. It took a little while to get there. This isn't an exceptionally long book, but it did feel like it took a while before what felt like the real plot was uncovered. And then once we get to that real plot, I was like, oh, okay, so things are getting a little bit heavier now, things are getting darker, and there's a lot more stakes established. But I was hoping, as the character is trying to figure out the best way to protect herself, her sister, and really uncover all of the dark truths that this hotel is hiding, I kind of had wished we'd gotten a little bit more information sprinkled in throughout, and instead it felt like there was a moment when a character interacts with someone else and they get the whole backstory of everything and all the answers all at once, and it's toward the end of the book, and I wish we'd had those breadcrumbs along the way, that it had almost a mystery to it where you're trying to piece together and you're getting some information, and it does, but I kind of wished it had been more so that when we do get to that point of the book, it didn't feel like we were discovering everything all at once or most of it all at once. And that is kind of how it felt. And I was like, I'm pretty close to being done with this book, and I feel like I'm only just now getting all the information that the character needs. And so the pacing was a little bit strange. It is a standalone, although maybe there will be eventually another one where you're exploring more about the hotel and what transpires after the events of this first one. But it just, like I said before, I guess I had wished it had either been a lot more bizarre and over the top and ridiculous and maybe even angsty, or I wish it had been a lot eerier and darker and mysterious throughout. And it was kind of a hybrid, which is going to work for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to like that it's a little bit more balanced. But for something that I think relies on it being a lot of atmosphere and setting and the establishing of a feeling, I just wasn't connecting with that in this particular instance. That's it though for some new fantasy books from this year. Let me know some other ones that you've picked up recently, and if you've read these ones, feel free to let me know your thoughts. A big thank you again to GlassesUSA.com for working with me. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.